So hello and welcome to this video on the AJH V Shape Wave Twist and Distort module. Now this is two stages that we can go one into the other in series, we can mix in parallel or use it as a dual channel unit. Let's check out a bit of what's to come in the video before we dive into the features and the patches. So it's an all analog wave shaper, and I'd say that this leans to the kind of warmer, musical, slightly softer side of shaping, and I'll come to that in a second. So the top section is an input, a shape output, a shape CV, and with the shape and the offset, we can kind of PWM waves, taking triangles through to ramps and saws, or taking saws through to triangles and kind of mellowing out slightly richer waves. We can add an offset and get a hard edge in this, which creates extra harmonics too. Moving down to the distort, by default, this dotted line shows you that the output of the shaper goes to the distortion, but you could just plug the distortion straight in and use it independently. That's got a CV and its own output. Now we have a distort and an offset control, and we can soft or hard clip in the normal mode, or we can fold it back on itself, and it's quite a soft folder, but when you put a richer wave in, it does really add a lot of extra harmonics. With softer waves, you get a kind of single fold Batman-ears waveform. I'll overlay a little graphic. And we can still choose whether it's soft or hard clipping as it kind of enters that folding. So it's a very musical shaper. As I said, we could go shaper to distort, or we could go into distort to the shaper. We could go completely in parallel. We could use it for two different sounds. You could process drums or transient stuff, or just put oscillator waves straight in, which is kind of what it was designed for and where it shines. But putting in complex waves can yield some great results too. So let's dive into some patches. So having had a look at what the V Shape does, let's hear it. The blue trace on data is my input. The green trace up top is my output. So straight away you can notice that this is phase inverted. The phase is flipped. When this is a peak, this is a trough. So it's a triangle wave coming in, simple low pitch triangle wave. Going into the shaper and straight out. We're not using the distortion and folding section just yet. So let's play around with that shape and we'll see how it kind of folds in a kind of PWM-like effect over the input wave. So it creates this kink at the top of the wave that then opens up and skews. Halfway through, when you've got this added kind of kink that's opened up, it's almost like an octave up effect. It looks like a double triangle, twice the rate of the input. Let's try the offset. I'm going to swap the input wave from the triangle to a saw. It's a nice way to animate a wave. Let's go back to the triangle and check out the distortion section. Now to start with, you can see this triangle's been softened down to a sine-like wave. I've got soft clip and normal distort. We're not going to fold it just yet. So not much control there, but that's just because this soft clipping is what's rounding off this triangle wave. Go to hard clipping though. We can get our triangle back and then clip it out to not quite a square, but more like a square tone. So let's hear that together. If we go into the input, the shape will feed the distortion and then we'll come out of the distortion. So when you use them together, there's a lot of very musical shaping, and it's not harsh, it's not mega folded, it's not mega distorted, it's not super overly rich. It's very musical and kind of almost pays respect to the input signal, if you like. Let's go back to the distortion and check out the folding. There's those famous Batman ears that you can get with a wave folder. And notice that the little peaks, the ears on the Batman wave, do change when we change the clipping. So let's modulate this, and I think we'll take this one up to audio rates as well. Let's first go into the shaper, where we audio rate mod the distortion. So again, a lot of tones to be had, but musical and not harsh. It's nice to see it embracing the softer, warmer side of shaping. So here we're exploring the V shape as a kind of weird shape in VCA, in that we're also getting level control, but to wave shape a saw wave, and there's some delay in the background, so let's kill the delay. And we're getting some interesting tones from it. The actual input, if I swap over to this blue trace on data, simply a saw wave with a Vought per octave sequence going in. Now I'll remove my modulation, and of course we can shape this. So the first thing I wanted to do was use an LFO to move that shaper, the top section. Now that's an audio rate, so let's drop that level down. You can hear that kind of almost PWMing around. Now I could use another LFO to the bottom section. And let's take it up to audio rates. Instead I want to use an envelope, and this will function like a VCA in that we'll get level control as well as modulating that folding and distorting. Now by playing with the DC offset and the distort, we can change the response of the envelope without actually touching the envelope curves or times. And we get this nice little glitch on the tail end of the note before it disappears. Add some delay. I mean, it sounds like folding, it sounds like PWM, it sounds like unison effects. It sounds like there's a lot more going on than a single saw wave. Okay, so sonically, this is a slightly strange one, but we're not listening to what's happening sonically in terms of the audio. We're going to look at shaping, folding, and distorting LFOs. So it's a triangle wave coming in. That's the top trace, the green one on data. That triangle wave is swelling in some noise. I have a bass drum signifying the start of every LFO cycle. So that's nothing to do with the V shape, but just get familiar with this for a second. So the kick is like the clock. The triangle opening the noise just shows us and lets us hear the input. Now running that triangle through the V shape and starting with the shaper, we're definitely getting a different shape. Now this is controlling the pitch of a sine wave and the modulation of some crushing and downsampling. So there's a little bit all over the place, but you can hear what's going on with this LFO. So let me bring that sound in. And you can see that kind of kink we get in the middle of the wave. That's like a triangle double the rate of the input. Let's try folding it. First, soft clipping, that triangle LFO. You can see and hear it's more sine-like with that soft clipping rounding the edges. Hard clipping. This acts as like a hold stage. Now folding. Folding with a soft clipping stage. So there's a lot of potential there for shaping modulation sources. Now let's pull this patch and try an envelope at the input. So here's an envelope that's just been triggered regularly. We can see that again on the green trace. Blue trace, we can see this is inverted, and with this offset up full, we're getting this kind of little glitchy chirp in the wave as well. So now we're getting that glitch and almost an offset. In terms of offsetting the time against the input. Let's try clipping that. Folding it. So again, you've scope there to really mess with and adjust your envelopes. And if you were using the envelope to control your sound, or say the amplitude through a VCA, but then you modulated it in the V shape and took that to control a tonal parameter, you start to get some interesting results from a single modulation source. So let's take a look at the V shape to process drums. Not really what it's made for, but why not? We might get some interesting distortion. So here's the beat I'm sending in, completely dry. Deep snare, already saturated-ish kick, some reverby metallic stuff. It's the black noir from Endorphins. Now, we're going into the shaper and straight out. We're ignoring the distortion section for now. And let's try and sequence it. So I'm just going to add a voltage to the CV for the top section. And the kick and snare have got like an octave up effect. Well, the hats have this nice sort of kind of sequence noise thing going on. Let's try the distortion section on its own. And that soft clipping's really nice. It's just giving that snare a bit more smack, if you can really listen to the lower mids where that fundamental is in the snare tone. Hard clipping. Much more prominent on the kick. Now putting that in against the dry sound. It's just got more weight and life in those lower frequencies. We're now going to go back to the shaper, through the shaper to the distortion. And we're going to CV both of them with independent sequences. It's got a nice vibe to it. So this is a patch and a piece of music that I've built up around the V shape. I'm just quickly going to run you through the layers and its kind of conception, but I'll let the track and all the making of bonus extra stuff I'm going to release as music. modular music, who'd have thought, that I'm actually going to put out later. So here's what's coming through the shaper section of the V shape, and this is how the whole thing started. Simply taking a saw wave into it, and I really like that soft, almost pulse width like modulation that using an LFO over shape will skew the saw through triangle to ramp and back. And it's just got this lovely softness to it in terms of it's a saw wave, it should be richer than this, so softening it down to a triangle in the middle worked really well. Now adding to that, I've then got some effects chains. That includes a delay, a reverb, and I'm wave shaping with a wave swarm the output of the reverb and delay. It's a bit backwards doing it that way, but we get some great rich glitchy effects from the wave swarm. And you can check the wave swarm video out in the description, after this one of course. Add the fully wet reverb on top. Because this is glitching the effects but not the dry sound, we get this interesting background, foreground, harsh, soft thing going on. And it's interesting for building up these droning ambient textures. And another little trick for getting more out of the V shape is to use the normaling of the output from the shaper to the distorting, and then do something else with the distort out. I've got it going into the wave swarm. We could really kind of glitch it out. It's doing some folding. I can soften it, but I prefer the folding. It's then going to a VCA, and I simply have an envelope controlling the VCA. So playing with that as a rhythmic layer against the more dense, affected droning layers. Again, just gives me lots to play with when creating music. So if you want more from this patch, watch out for me putting up music and all that kind of stuff later on. But let's get back to the V shape. Now here we have a quite lo-fi and already quite dirty wavetable that is modulating and morphing itself. And this is the completely dry sound we're listening to. Now let's run that over to the shaper. Pull out my modulation for now. And let's try a slow LFO over the shape CV. So we get another dimension of animation on top of this gritty wavetable. Now trying the distort on its own. Certainly with a fold we get some really aggressive overtones. Let's try an LFO over that. So going into the top channel, the shaper, then into distort. I'm going to LFO modulate the shaper again. So for this final patch, I'm using this as a dual channel unit rather than one chained into the other. Now I've got two sounds and a kick. Let me mute them all and we'll build them back up. The kick, just kind of setting the scene, that's irrelevant. I've got the bass, which is going to the shaper at the top. This is a saw wave on the way in, so it's really kind of mellowing it out. And I like that kind of really plucky kind of thing that it's adding. This is going through a low pass gate, but you can hear that harmonic thing and the little spike it's putting up on that waveform. Works great to just really get this bass punching through. The second part is the distortion, and this is an already modulated wavetable, but I'm also modulating distort with an LFO, and I'm folding it. If I open it up, it's fairly harsh, but that's because it was harsh on the way in, and then I'm folding it on top. The perfect food to get it really kind of smacky and transient through this low pass gate, because it's that harmonically rich, the front end of that note, really striking. These are panned, so this is panned to the right. I have a delay from this sound, panned to the left. Bass right down the middle. Kick. So thanks for watching this video on the AJH Synth V Shape. Be sure to check out the Wave Swarm video that I've mentioned below and some other AJH videos on my channel. Thanks for watching. Hit like, comment, subscribe, all the usual good stuff. Go support me on Patreon if you want some extra content and want to support this content too. Cheers.